Hello students, I'm going to make a couple of comments about the SQL project. So first of all, recall that you were required to use proper SQL formatting according to the standards that we talked into class. So that includes capitalization, line breaks, and use of semicolons. So if you notice some deductions and you're not sure why, ask yourself if you used the same capitalization as in the solutions, the same line breaks as in the solutions, and also put a semicolon at the end. All right, and we had a question about this here to once again make sure you understood this, and it was also in the directions. All right, so number 3 was pretty straightforward. No, I'm not going to make any comments there. 5 was pretty straightforward. We didn't have any issues on number 7. Number 8 was pretty clean. 10 was pretty clean. So I will let you just look through those and check out the solutions. Now on number 11, this was a case where you had a where statement with multiple criteria. We needed product name starting with an S and also price greater than 30 or price less than 20. So the trick here is you had to make sure that you put this piece in parentheses. Otherwise, it's an ambiguous where statement where it might be interpreted as product name light, like S, wildcard, and price greater than 30, and SQL might group those two pieces together and then look at the or 20, price less than 20, separately. So we have to put the parentheses around this piece in order to ensure that it groups those two criteria together, that we meet this price criteria and also that product name begins with an S. Okay, so moving on here, so no major issues with number 13. I will make a comment that when you're working with a numerical data, you don't want to put those values in quotation marks. So for example here, price less than 50, you should not put 50 in quotation marks. For category ID equals 3, it is okay to put that in quotation marks because 3 is not really a numerical number here. It's a digit, but it's really being treated more as text. So it would be acceptable to put that in quotes or not in quotes. All right, no major issues on number 15. No problems on 17. Okay, and no problems on number 18. The only place where you could get into trouble on number 18 is if you put an additional field in the select statement. Let's take a look at what I mean by introducing an extra field. So this is the correct code, okay, and it returns 196 records. Let's take a look at order ID 10248. It included 3 products. Let's look at that order details table that we pulled this from. Here is the order ID 10248. We see that it appears 3 times, which makes sense based on the result that we got when we ran our code. And notice that there are 3 products, 3 different products. They have 3 different IDs, 11, 42, and 72. All right, let me run the code again. All right, so here 10248. We get 3, that makes sense. We just saw that there were 3 different product IDs, but let's say that I include product ID here. And let me run this again. It's not going to give me an error message, but notice that the product ID here is just the first product that appeared, product 11. There's no real reason why product 11 should appear with number products 3. And so it's a little bit misleading and confusing. So let me just take that piece off again and we'll run it. And we see that there are 3 products. And let's look back at the orders details table. Remember, product ID is simply the first product that occurred. So there's nothing special about it. But if I put that extra field, again, product ID here, it's simply going to grab the first product and then it'll do the rest of what we asked it to do. The order ID 10248 and the count 123. Okay, so I hope it's clear to you why the product ID being included is a little bit misleading. So we talked a lot about the idea that when you use an aggregate function, like a count, I'm summarizing this, and I have another field, like order ID, then that field must show up in the group by clause. And if you have any extraneous fields that are neither aggregated or in the group by clause, it's going to be confusing and misleading. Okay, so moving on, in the next case, number 20, we had to include both a where clause and also a having clause. And a big piece of this problem was me being able to know that you are able to distinguish between when to use where and when to use having. So if you didn't include a having and also a where, then that was a major error for this problem and you would have lost almost all of the points, okay? Because that is the purpose of this problem, is to show me that you know when to use where and when to use having. So you use where when you're just subsetting a field based on the criteria for that field, and you use having when you're setting criteria for a field that has been aggregated. Here, the count of supplier ID less than 3. All right, so moving on, in the next one it was just a basic inner join, so nothing too complicated. We have another inner join in 24. This time we're simply going to order the results in a certain way. Number 26 gets a little more complicated. We're doing an inner join, and once again we have a situation where I have to know to use the where statement and also the having statement, and I have to know which one is appropriate. Also, I need to make sure that I use not like as my criteria in the where statement. If you use the not equals to sign, you will get a different result. All right, because I'm searching for jars anywhere in the string of the text for the unit. Not like jars is going to give me a different result than not equal to jar. Okay, moving on. The last one, I think the tricky part about this one is simply that you needed to focus on the idea that you were only asked to find 2 things. You needed to simply select the order ID field and then also the sum for the order. And so you had that formula right here. And we just needed to sum that for each order ID. So those are the only 2 things that should appear in the select statement. So mostly the errors that I got on this one were people just included all these extraneous fields, which aren't going to work because, again, we're in that situation where we're going to aggregate one field and then group by the other field. And that will give us the order, the sum for each order ID.